Hello and welcome to Tea and Tangles. I'm Debbie with The Tangled Heart. You can find me at thetangledheart.com. You can also send me an email with any questions or comments at thetangledheart@gmail.com. Today we're doing a watercolor session. We're doing focusing on flowers and tangling, adding the two together. And if you purchased a kit, the watercolor kit, you will have your sample watercolor. This is Arteza Watercolors, little sample page. You will have a couple of watercolor brushes, a flat and a round. You will have Zentangle paper, if you wish to choose that today. This is a really nice paper. It takes markers, watercolor, pretty much any color very well. So you'll have some of those. You'll also have a Micron 01 pen. You don't have to use the Micron pen, but you do need to make sure that it's archival ink if you plan on watercoloring on top of it. If you watercolor first and then tangle, you can use probably pretty much any pen. But if you don't want it to bleed, you want to make sure that it's an archival ink, and Micron is a really good pen for that. And in your kit, you also will have either a white jelly roll or a sparkly jelly roll pen. So we're going to use those to enhance our flowers today. So let's go ahead and get started. Do you have your cup of tea ready? I have Fireside Vanilla Spice today. It's a Celestial Seasoning brand, and it's still steeping, so it's kind of clear right now, but it's quite yummy. I'm going to set that aside, and let's get started. Also wanted to comment on the mug that I have. It's my grandmother's old mug from Nescafe. She used to drink instant coffee a lot. And she saved up, back in those days you could save up so many labels and send it in to get free things, and I have her set of Nescafe coffee mugs. So my grandma's with me today. Okay, so you also have some mixed media paper included in the kit. You don't have to use that. You can use the Zentangle paper, pretty much any paper, preferably that will hold water and stand up to water. Mixed media paper is good. Of course, watercolor paper is great. It won't work very well with just like regular typing paper. So you want to make sure you have a sturdy paper to do the watercolor. And today what I like to do, since I do have this big surface here, and I'm going to work smaller than that, and I like to divide up the paper into smaller segments to work on. And today I'm going to use the Zentangle paper as a template, and I'm just going to create a smaller area to work on the larger paper. You can, of course, you can certainly use the Zentangle paper too, which is really nice. But for now, we're going to use this so I can show you some other things, maybe right on the side, and help you get through this. Okay, so what I'm going to do first, let me get my samples here to show you. We're going to do something that looks like this. You see we have watercolor flowers and leaves, and then we've done some tangling on top. So it's going to be similar to that. It never turns out the same way twice, so this is always fun. And you'll also need some water for our watercolor. And I do recommend a paper towel and or a piece of material, like a cloth that you can use to clean the brushes if you need. Okay? So let's get started. So first things first, you're going to pick the colors of flowers that you want. And you do not have to choose the ones that I choose. Feel free to pick different colors than I have. And if you have your own watercolor, you can, feel free to play around and use whatever colors you have. The template or the sample that I gave you has a nice range of colors. You can see I've used this one already. It doesn't have a lot of color on it, but a little goes a long way, and these sample sheets are really nice that you can get a small work done using just some samples, which is fun. If you're not sure you want to invest any money in anything, you can try it out first. Okay, so for this, I'm going to use the flat brush that you have, and you want to get it wet and decide what color flowers you want. And I think I'm going to start with this rose color. You want to get it nice and wet. Okay. And for this, I'm going to cut mine out eventually, so I don't care if I go over this line. This line is a suggestion, because I know I'm going to cut it out. If you want to really stay inside the lines, feel free to do that. But for this, I'm going to be going outside the line, knowing that I'm going to be cutting it off, okay? And the first thing first, you're going to use this first color and basically put some abstract shapes of flowers down. As you can see, it looks more like a blob, but you can see where it could be a flower, okay? And I'm going to make mine a little larger than I did on my other one, just because that's what I feel like doing. You can certainly make them small. You can make just a few on the page, however you want to do it. I like to work in odd numbers too. Like if you have 3 to 5 of one color, in nature, things tend to be more odd numbered. You do get petals of 4 on some flowers, but a majority of things are odd. Okay, so I'm going to start with that. I can always add more. And then I think I'm going to use, I think I'll put this orange. Now, watercolor will usually dry lighter than the color that you put down, just to be aware of that. So if you fill up your brush with pigment, it's still going to dry lighter. So now I have these 3 main flowers that I kind of like. I'm going to put maybe some smaller orange ones in and kind of fill it up. Start filling it up. And it's okay if you overlap. See how I overlapped that? It's perfectly fine. And you just want to keep going and filling up that white space. And I might add, I want to see what this, didn't clean my brush off there, but that's okay. This is bubblegum pink. Let's have a little orange in that, that's kind of pretty. Okay. The idea is to kind of fill in these areas. And I might add a little bit of this cerulean blue. It's one of my favorite colors. I might add some smaller flowers to it. You can see how I'm just adding Again, you can overlap if you want. You should start seeing how paper is starting to fill up. Okay. And I have quite a bit of space in here, so I might go back in and add maybe another pink. Maybe add pink up here. Okay. Now, you can certainly let it dry in between each color. If you do, then you're not going to get this interesting blooming effect that's, you see what's going on here, where I put wet on top of wet. It can create some really interesting detail, I think. So, but if you don't want that, you want to let it dry in between each color before you move on to the next one. So for this, I am also going to try to find a pretty, my paper towel was used before, but I still have some clean areas on it. And I want to dab over some of the wet spots on there. And that can take up some of the color. You can also add some really cool texture details. So if you have a paper towel that has a pattern, if you put it down while it's very wet, then it will pull it off and have these really cool extra little details to it. Okay, so now I'm going to go back over these. The bigger pink ones are kind of dry, and I'm going to go back over it with a little bit more to add a little bit more color as well as some layering. See how that this is going to dry darker than the one behind, the little area behind it. So I'm just adding some extra detail that way. You don't have to do that, but it will help add some texture and color and just a little bit of more interest to it. Okay, and I'm going to do the same thing. You want to clean your brush in between each color, and I'm going to go back with the orange and do that again with the orange. And if you pick up some of that other, you can swirl it in and have some fun with that. Okay. Now you notice I've left some areas white there, and I'm going to add leaves to that. So you have a light green and a sap green, and you can try it on the side which color you like, if you especially if you have a new sample palette. We can see what, once you've used the palette, what the color is going to be like. And I'm going to add, I think I'm going to add some dark green, the sap green in here. And I'm going to blot this one more time, just so it's not as wet. Again, feel free to let it dry first before you go on to this next step. Now, and it doesn't take a lot for it to dry. If you, at this point, add the leaves, it may bleed into it, which is perfectly fine. But just kind of a word of warning. So for a leaf, I'm kind of going to do sort of like parentheses, like you're writing parentheses. And you're going to end up with sort of a leaf shape. That's the type I'm going to do here. And you can fill it in. And you can go right over top of some of the flowers. It's perfectly fine. And just pick some areas where you can fill in some of the green, some of the white space with the green. And I want to add a little bit of this light green to it, just to give it a little bit more interest. There's no right or wrong. You can put as many or as few as you want in there, in any direction. You can think about which flowers you think the leaves might go to. Again, you might cover up some flowers, and that's okay. Because when we get to the next stage, we're going to pick and choose the flowers we really want to enhance. And then the rest of it will end up kind of like it's a background. Okay. Now I'm going to take a clean towel and just go over the top of that and see what happens here. Okay, I'm kind of liking that. And see how it can add some fun texture to it by dabbing some of the, when it's very wet, you can get some neat texture. Okay, and just like how we went back over the flowers with a second color, I'm going to come back and do that again. You can even add maybe a little bit yellow. Maybe I'll do that. Let's add a little yellow to it and see what happens. And I might not add as much. I might just put some right in the center of it. And when it dries, we should be able to see it a little bit more. So I'm just using the kind of the edge of the brush and just adding a little bit of detail right in the center of it. Okay, there we go. And I'm going to dab. You don't have to do that. You can certainly let it wait. Now you can see where we put the yellow in the leaves, that's kind of showing up a little bit more now. Okay? So you can continue on working on yours. I'm going to let mine dry a little bit because my next step is to draw over top of this, and I want it to be fairly dry. If you work on it while it's still really wet, especially if you're using an 01 micron pen, it kind of will get clogged up, or it gets saturated and it won't draw. So it's best to do it when it's dry. So I'm going to show you a couple of things that we're going to, some examples here while mine is drying. So you see this on this one, I have chosen the flowers that I want to highlight, and I'll start with those first. And there's all kinds of different ways you can make the petals, and we'll go over that in a moment. But this one is like a swirl. This one is just typical kind of petal shapes, okay? You can decide if you want all the pink ones to look a certain way, all the yellow ones to be the same type of flower, so that they're all gonna have the same type of petal, Okay, and then you can decide what you want to do with the leaves. This one, I decided to outline it, and then I had put a darker kind of, instead of the yellow that I used on this one, I put some darker in there. I decided to kind of show that off, and then I put the Tangled tipple, if you're familiar with that, inside of it. And to me, it kind of actually made it look sort of like a pea pod, which is kind of cool. I think it might be neat to make like a garden and have vines and pea pods coming off of it. I think that would be fun. Okay. And so this one I used the black pen. If you have a little thicker pen like an 05 or an 08, you can go back over and then highlight, go back over and kind of go make the lines darker around some of the flowers to make them pop off more. Okay. And in tangling, we do shading. Oftentimes in watercolor, when we do this technique, we don't have to go back and shade. I usually don't, because I like the way that the watercolors, when they blend together, they kind of create their own shading and highlighting, which I think is fun. And then you can see where using the glitter pen, I put right in the center. And with the white pen, I used a little bit of highlighting on some of the petals. So that's one example. And this one is a lot different. I used much darker colors. And it got a little bit muddy in there, which I don't mind. But I decided these were kind of like little poppies. And I made some different types of petals where I started here and I just made them look like they're looking up instead of looking down on top of them. But I used a white gel pen instead of the black that I did in the black micron. You can see the difference. And this helped because the colors are much darker and the white just made it stand out much more. Also used, you can see a little bit of the metallic-y stardust jelly roll that you can see some of the flowers that I did on that too. So if you want some that just are there, you may not notice them as much. They're kind of hidden, but they're a nice little gem there. Okay. So let's go back and check this and see if it's dry enough for me to, I might just kind of pat it one more time. So don't feel like you need to rush through this. You can pause until yours is ready to draw on top of. Again, a little bit wet is okay, a little bit damp, I should say. But for the most part, you want it to be pretty dry. So I'm going to give this a try here. So, my first step is to go back and find which flowers I want to be kind of on top, the ones that are going to stand out more. Okay. And I know I want this one to stand out. I'm going to start with that one, I think. Now you see where the leaves are over top of it. Well, for this you can pretend and draw right over top of it, and they just kind of disappear. I'll show you here. For example, this one bled on top of that, and that's okay. I just pretend like it's okay. It's not even there. Okay, watercolor is very forgiving with that, and this is kind of making your eye look at what you want. You're kind of making it look at what you want it to see, if that makes sense. Okay, so I'm going to focus on this big flower here, and I'm going to make that one be on top of all these other ones. So I'm going to pretend like this blue one is behind it, this blue is behind it, this leaf is behind it, these leaves are behind it, and I'm just going to draw, because you can still see the kind of the shadow of the background of that lightest pink that we had, and I'm going to start there. And I'm going to go around just like that, okay? And then, actually, now that I think I want to have an inside to it as well. And so I'm just going to go back and add a little bit of maybe orange and get the seeds in there. And I can't remember what that's called on a real flower. Go back in and find the center of the flower and just give it a little. There we go. That's what it was missing. Okay, there we go. So we'll deal with that part in a moment, but I'm going to start here and I'm going to add another kind of layer of petals to that and find, because I had that lighter pink and now I have the darker pink that was on top of it. So I'm going to create sort of layers to the petals. And I'm just going to, it's a little bit wet, but I'm just going to kind of round what I just put down. Okay, so now I have these three different kind of layers here. I'm going to start with this inside one, and I'm going to decide what type of petal I want. Because I have all of these kind of curves and points to it, I'm going to use that, and when I see a point, I'm going to bring it up there. I'm going to make it kind of curved. Okay. See how I'm doing that? I'm finding that curve on the line. Just like that. Okay? And you can certainly make more. You make it have a lot of them. Make them kind of even. Okay? And then for this outer one, you can add all kinds of different things to it. I think I'm just going to put some lines all the way across. Okay, I'm going to make it sort of frilly. Again, there's no right or wrong. And feel free to turn the paper as you need. Okay. And we'll come back to the center part after it dries a little bit more. Alrighty, so I'm going to go to this blue flower here since I like it. And we're going to do that. So we're going to pretend, just in tangling, we're going to pretend like it's going underneath, so we're not going to do that part, okay? And I'm just going to add a center. And I might make this one something like that. Okay. And I like this flower here. I'm going to pretend like this one is not there. So I'm going to do the same thing as I did over here. And I tend to draw outside line even though I know I'm going to cut it off, just so I can keep it consistent. And this one doesn't have so much of that double layer like this one had, so I'm not going to worry too much about that. But I am going to keep it similar to that shape, and I'm going to do some curves and make it just like that. Okay, I might give it some more. Okay. And I think I want to preserve this leaf a little bit. Go ahead and make that stand out. And let's see. I think this yellow flower might stand out. So basically what we're doing is we're finding the ones we want to keep on top, if that makes sense. And once we do that, then we'll be able to find, well, the background will make more sense then. So for this one, I'm going to do something a little bit different. I'm going to follow the inside circle and then come off of it. Okay? So I'm going to follow and come off. Follow and come off. Follow and come off. I'm going to make kind of like this swirl pattern. Okay. And let's see, I'm going to make this one stand out. And so in order to do that, you just don't worry about the leaves or anything. If you want that one to stand out, you trace around it, okay? And this one I think will make sort of like a petunia, is what it reminds me of. Okay. And I think I'll go to this one. And I think I will do, I'm liking that petunia look today. So I think I'm going to do that. Hopefully this makes sense. If you have any questions, you can certainly email me. Now, you can see how I did this double layer here. You don't have to do that. You can certainly just make it one whole piece like that. Sometimes I will do it just to give it some more interest. You don't even have to do the whole thing. And this one, I'm going to keep it consistent with that, but you don't have to. Not all the flowers are going to have all of these curves and points to them. And you just want to keep continuing doing that. The flowers you want to be on top, the ones you see first. Now, if you know a lot of different tangles, which are repeated patterns, you could start adding them inside of these petals if you want to. So if you like tipple, you could add some tipple in there. And we may do that in the center here in just a moment. So now I'm going to look at some of the leaves that I might want to be on top. But once I find the flowers that I want to be highlighted, then you can go in and find the leaves that you want to be kind of on top. Now you can see I have this white space in here, and we'll deal with that in a little while. So just continue working on your flowers. Okay, now you can see now this one, because I have these leaves on top, and this flower on top, and this flower on top, this one is now behind these. So I'm just going to when I do the petals, I'm just going to stop when I get to something. When I get to a line, I'm just going to stop, okay? And then you just continue on like that, as if it's going underneath. See, I want this leaf on top, so I'm going to pretend like that's going underneath. And I think I'll do some petals like this. Now this flower is really covered up by the leaves, but I'm just going to pretend like the circle, the center is there, and just make it look like it's covered up, just like that. Okay. How is yours looking? Do you have any questions about it? I think one thing that you just have to get used to is that it's okay if it's not perfect. It's not supposed to be realistic flowers, right? This is abstract. And so abstract really is whatever you want it to be. But it's giving an illusion of these are flowers, okay? All right. I think I'm almost done here. I have a few more to go. And I think I have everything. Now I'm going to decide what I want to do for these leaves. I think I am just going to cut them in half, you know, with a vein down the middle. And you can have different types of leaves if you want to, because we have different types of flowers going on in here. But for the practical part, I'm just going to do a vein down the center. Just like that. And if your pen gets kind of clogged with the watercolor, feel free to just, you can write over here on the side, kind of make sure it's clear, wipe it off. And I think for this one, I'm going to choose to do just some lines on one side of the leaf, okay? And it's basically something like that. But I'm going to keep it on just one side of it. Let's see what I like, how I like that. You could certainly do the whole thing if you wanted to. You can decide not just to leave them too. You don't have to do anything to them. But adding a little bit of lines or dots or circles will give it a little bit of texture. And your brain likes to see that detail, I think. Okay, I'm kind of liking it. Now, what I'm noticing is these white spots. Oops, sorry about that. What I'm noticing are the white spots there, And I think what I'm going to do is to take a bigger pen. This is a little bit bigger. It's a Sharpie pen. And fill in this area with black. And it's going to make the color come alive a little bit more, I think. Again, you do not have to do this. This is an extra step. But if you like the way mine's looking, you can give it a try. Because we've now covered everything with the watercolor that we want, and so it's okay to go over this now with a pen that may not like water too much. You can see how now the flowers are starting to pop out a little bit more. It just depends on the look that you're going for. How's it going for you? And don't forget to stop every now and then, admire what you're doing. Take a sip of tea, like I'm going to do. And kind of reevaluate what you want in it. You can certainly turn it around so you can reach things better. I think I have one more little spot left to do. Making mini art like this, I call this mini art because it's on the small side, but it's fun to cut out and maybe write a note to somebody and send it, include it in a card. It's always nice to get something that's homemade, I think. So I'm going to go now back to these center parts. And I think I am going to add what's called tipple, if you're familiar with that in the Tangle. Basically, they're connecting O's. So you have something like that. And then if you want, you can fill in around them to fill in any of the space that's in between these O's, like, and give it some darkness like that. So I'm going to see, without doing the dark, see how I like some of these in the middle here. So I'm going to just start, and let me use my smaller pen for that. And maybe I will fill it in. Now the good thing about this Tangle is that if you don't like it, you can correct a lot of the O's. And if you don't like it, you can cover the whole thing up in black and pretend like you meant to do it. So I might do a few of them with this tipple pattern. And then another thing you can do is basically just a grid, maybe a curve it to give the illusion of it being round. So curved in one side this way, and then curve the other way like that. So it gives an illusion of it being rounded. And I think I'm going to do that on some of these bigger ones here. And you don't have to make them really small like this. It can be big. Like that. If you want, you could just leave them as lines. You can also, if you know printemps, which we did in another video, if you've watched that yet, it's like a cinnamon roll shape. It's a spiral. And I might put just one in the center of this. Something like that. Make it look a little different. Okay. Now what you can also do is some of these bigger flowers, they're kind of merging into all the other ones. So you can take a thicker marker or just go back over it with your 01 and make it stand out a little bit more. Go over the outline, the outer edge one, so that it is standing out more from the other ones, and then you'll really, your eye's really going to see, oh yeah, that one's more on top. I might even do since this one has a double layer, I might do this one as well. It just helps it stand out a little bit more. Again, don't have to do that, just a little tip. If you're thinking that it's looking a little flat and you want it to stand out. You can even do it for some of the leaves. Sometimes the colors get blended in so much you want it to make it stand out more. Okay. There we are. Now I'm going to take my jelly roll, and I always like the sparkly. It may not show up well on video, and it oftentimes will show up mostly when you turn it in the light, especially if you have a lighter one. This is a gold one. And I might add these, just some maybe extra little petal kind of things to like aura that shape. Add some, it's sort of like adding highlights to it. I don't know if you can see that. You can also just kind of fill it in with some stripes. Because of this light color, it's not going to detract from the flower very much. And maybe I'll do some one here too. Kind of following the lines, so it's not just straight. You might be curved more to give it the shape of a petal that might be curved. Okay. And then if you have a white jelly roll, you can add maybe the center of some of these smaller flowers. You can make those white if you want. I think it shows up pretty well on the blue. Makes it pop out some. And jelly rolls can get clogged up quite easily, so you might have to wipe it off periodically. Once you get the flow going, it's pretty good. And see how much that stands out. And you can even go back in and see this tipple, maybe fill in some of those. And as the white dries, it will sometimes take on the shade of what was behind it. So it might turn out a little bit more yellow. Depends on how thick you put it down. And then you can also add little highlights to the, kind of kiss it with some, where the light might shine on it. Tends to show up better on the darker petals. And I might even add maybe something like that. You can even do it on the leaf. On the side that you didn't do the lines, maybe add a little curve of white to it. Let's see, what do you think? Now, I think I'm done with that, so I'm going to hide my initials in there somewhere. Or they don't have to be hidden, but sometimes you can find a fun place to put it. But I think I'm just going to find a leaf, maybe this bottom leaf, and add my initials. And I usually do the year too, just so that I can remember when I did it. And 20. And there you have it. Now, I am going to cut mine out. If you want, you can certainly preserve the leaves and flowers and things that you went outside the line with. Or you can be brave and cut them off. I know it's hard to take that leap sometimes, but I'm going to be brave and cut mine off where I intended it to be. But it certainly would be pretty if you cut around each thing. It really depends on what you want to do with it. If you want to frame it, then it's going to be easier to have it cut. But if you wanted to cut it out and then put it on like the top of a card or something, that would be really pretty. And let's see what we have. I like the colors of that. And turn it around, admire it, different angles. So let's see how all these turned out together. They all come out, these have similar colors, but look how different they are. And then this one is very, very different. They're all just as pretty. I hope you enjoy this video and using the kit, and please send me pictures of what you do because I love to see all the creativity that everyone has. And if you have any questions, you can send me an email at thetangledheart@gmail.com, or you can go to the website, thetangledheart.com, Tangled.com. You can order a kit if you like, or send me a message, or sign up for the newsletter. And again, thank you so much and have a lovely rest of the day. Thank you.